I just need to not be found. 7 words, whispered in the rain by a 15-year-old girl who'd just saved a stranger's life. For 49 days, Rue Calloway had been invisible in Clarkfield, Tennessee, sleeping in drainage tunnels, eating from trash bins, running from the one person the system trusted to protect her. But when a 74-year-old veteran collapsed on the library steps and stopped breathing, Rue didn't run. She called 911. She performed the stroke protocol she'd memorized while her mother was dying. She saved Roy Merritt's life. And when his son, a Hells Angels president who'd been homeless at 11 and never forgotten what invisible looked like, asked her where she needed to be that night, those 6 words changed everything. What 89 bikers did next would expose a corrupt guardian who'd been stealing from trust funds of minors who'd died in his care for 6 years, and prove that the scariest-looking people in a room are sometimes exactly who you need. If you believe every child deserves someone who answers when they ask for help, subscribe right now, because this story is only beginning. Drop your city in the comments. Stay with me. I just need to not be found. 7 words, delivered in a whisper so quiet that Gideon Merritt had to lean forward to catch them. The girl who'd just saved his father's life was standing 6 feet away from him in the drizzle, one hand gripping the broken zipper of an oversized gray hoodie, her left shoe flapping with every small shift of weight because the sole had separated, and she'd repaired it with duct tape that was already failing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hysterical. She was calm, in the way people become calm when panic has been their baseline for so long that it stops registering as an emotion and becomes a state of being. Gideon Merritt was 54 years old. 6'2", 231 pounds of a man who'd spent 6 years working intake for Tennessee Child Protective Services before he quit in disgust and joined the Hells Angels 19 years ago. He knew what a child in crisis looked like. He'd seen it in case files and emergency placements and midnight removals where the kid clutched a trash bag of belongings and looked at him like he might be one more adult who'd say the right words and do nothing. He recognized the walk immediately, the way she moved along the wall instead of through open space, the way her shoulders pitched forward, making herself narrower. He'd walked that way once, at 11 years old, when his mother's boyfriend had cleared out their house and taken everything, including Gideon's winter coat. He'd slept in a church vestibule for 9 days in January, and not one adult had asked him what was wrong. He was 54. He hadn't forgotten what it looked like when a child was trying to be invisible. The ambulance doors closed. The paramedic, a woman named Chen, who'd worked this route for 6 years, had already told him the girl's intervention had made the difference. She called it in before anyone else even noticed he'd fallen. Knew to check his face symmetry, his arm strength, his speech. Stayed on the line. Kept him calm. Your father's at Vanderbilt Medical Center now, and he's got a decent shot at a full recovery because somebody acted fast. Gideon had thanked her. Watched the ambulance pull away, lights rotating but sirens quiet because his father was stable enough not to need the noise. Then he'd turned back toward the library entrance, toward the girl who was already moving toward the parking lot exit with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew how to leave a scene without drawing attention. He called out once, not loud, just enough. "Hey, you don't have to go anywhere." She stopped, turned partway. Her eyes were gray, wide set, the kind that took in everything at once without landing on any single point. Dark circles beneath them, deep enough that Gideon understood she hadn't slept properly in weeks. When she looked at him, she was calculating, weighing options. deciding if this stranger in a Hell's Angels cut was more dangerous than whatever she was running from. He walked toward her slowly, stopped 6 feet away, let her have the distance. "My dad is alive because of you," he said. She said nothing. "You got somewhere to be tonight?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Rue looked at him for a long time. Her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from cold and exhaustion, and 49 days of living on adrenaline and stolen sleep. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and flat, controlled in the way people control their volume when they've learned that being heard means being found. "I just need to not be found." Not, "I need help," not, "I'm in danger." She'd refined her ask down to its minimum viable form. "Just don't let them find me. Just tonight. Just that." Gideon Merritt had worked intake long enough to know that "them" was specific. Someone was looking. The threat was active, not past. And this 15-year-old girl with a yellowish bruise at her left temple, roughly 9 days old, roughly the size of a thumb, had learned that help was a word adults used to justify doing whatever they were going to do anyway. He took 1 step back, gave her more space, not less. Put his hands where she could see them, not raised, not performative, just visible. An old instinct from 6 years of talking to kids in bad situations. You show them your hands. "Nobody's finding you tonight," he said. He pulled out his phone, checked it once, put it away. "My brother Knotwood runs a 1967 Triumph restoration project on Tuesday nights. Loud, smells like oil, has a refrigerator with actual food in it. No one there is going to ask you anything you don't want to answer." He turned toward his bike, stopped, looked back. "You coming?" He didn't wait like he expected an answer. He waited like the answer didn't change anything. Rue Calloway had learned to measure danger in degrees. The man in front of her was large, wore leather, had a Hell's Angels patch that most people crossed the street to avoid. But his hands were steady. His voice was quiet. And he'd given her space when most adults closed distance, demanding explanations, asserting authority, making decisions for her before she'd finished speaking. She followed. The ride took 11 minutes. Rue had never been on a motorcycle before. Gideon handed her a helmet without comment, adjusted the strap himself with the careful efficiency of someone who'd done this for children before, and told her to hold on. The engine's vibration traveled through her entire body, louder than thought, and for those 11 minutes she couldn't hear anything except the roar and the wind and the controlled power of a machine moving through the night. When they pulled into the garage bay behind a building that looked like it had been a warehouse once, the sound that greeted them was different. Classic rock playing from a radio somewhere, the pneumatic hiss of an air compressor, the rhythmic clang of someone working metal. 3 motorcycles were already parked in a neat row along the far wall. The space smelled like motor oil, old coffee, and something Rue couldn't immediately place until she realized it was cinnamon. Someone had brought pastries and left the box open on a workbench. The overhead lights were industrial, bright and unforgiving, but the far corner had been set up with an old couch, a space heater glowing orange, and what looked like a small kitchen area with a microwave and that refrigerator Gideon had mentioned. 3 men looked up when the garage door rolled open. The first was older, maybe late 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and reading glasses perched on his nose. He was sitting at the workbench with a carburetor disassembled in front of him, parts organized with the precision of someone who'd been doing this work for decades. The second was younger, early 30s, with a laptop open beside a motorcycle frame. He'd been typing something, stopped when they entered, and his eyes went immediately to Rue, with the sharp assessment of someone trained to notice details. The third was massive, easily 6'4", with a burn scar running down his right forearm, and the kind of face that required you to look past the first impression. He'd been welding something, the mask pushed up on his forehead, and when he saw Gideon walk in with a 15-year-old girl who looked like she'd been sleeping outside, his expression didn't change. He just set down his tools and waited. "This is Rue," Gideon said. Simple. No explanation. "She saved my father's life tonight. She needs somewhere that's not outside." The older man with the reading glasses stood up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Knotwood," he said, nodding to her. "That's Halftone with the computer, and the guy who looks like he could bench press a Buick is Brimstone." Rue stood very still, backpack on both shoulders, hands gripping the straps. She scanned the exits without moving her head, noted the door they'd entered through, another door in the back corner, a window high on the east wall. Her body language screamed flight risk, and every man in that garage recognized it immediately. Knotwood moved to the small kitchen area. "You eaten today?" he asked, not looking directly at her, giving her the space to answer or not answer. "I'm fine," Rue said automatically. "That wasn't the question." Knotwood pulled open the refrigerator. "I've got leftover lasagna someone's wife made. It's good. You want some?" Rue's stomach betrayed her, a small sound she couldn't control. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a gas station hot dog she'd been rationing over 2 days. She looked at Gideon. He nodded once. "Okay," she said quietly. While Knotwood heated the food, Brimstone pulled a folding chair over and set it near the space heater, angled so Rue could see the whole room. He didn't say anything, just put the chair there and went back to his welding station. The gesture was clear. You get to see everything that's happening. No surprises. Halftone closed his laptop, leaned back in his chair. "So," he said, voice careful, neutral, "you know CPR or something?" "I know F.A.S.T, Rue said. Her voice was still quiet, but steadier now. "Face, arms, speech, time. Signs of a stroke. I learned it from a poster in a hospital waiting room while my mom was dying." The room went very quiet. Not awkward quiet. The quiet of men who understood that some truths didn't require follow-up questions. The microwave beeped. Knotwood pulled out the bowl, tested the temperature with his finger, added a fork, and brought it to her. Set it on a small table beside the chair. Didn't hand it to her. Let her pick it up when she was ready. Rue sat down slowly, backpack still on her shoulders. She took the bowl. The first bite was careful. Testing. The second bite, she couldn't slow down. She ate like someone who'd learned food was temporary, that plates got taken away, that showing hunger was weakness. Nobody watched her eat. They went back to their work. Knotwood returned to his carburetor. Halftone opened his laptop. Brimstone pulled his welding mask down, and the bright blue arc flared to life. The radio kept playing. The space heater kept glowing orange. And Rue Calloway, for the first time in 49 days, ate a meal without watching the door. When the bowl was empty, Gideon pulled up a chair, sat down across from her at a distance that didn't crowd. "You said you need to not be found," he said. "Who's looking?" Rue set down the bowl. Her hands went to her backpack straps again, gripping. "My guardian, Randall Sykes. He's a licensed foster care coordinator with Clarkfield County Department of Children's Services. He filed a runaway report the day I left. If anyone official finds me, they call him. And if he finds me..." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. I overheard him on the phone 7 weeks ago. He told someone I needed to not be a factor by January. He said there's $214,000. My mom's trust fund. He controls it until I'm 18, but there's an audit in February, and he's been spending money that was supposed to be for me. She reached into her backpack, pulled out a folded gas station road map, unfolded it carefully on the table between them. The margins of Panel 3, Eastern Tennessee grid, were covered in small, precise handwriting. Rue's handwriting. The conversation she'd overheard. Word for word. Gideon leaned forward, read the first few lines. His jaw tightened. He looked up at her. You wrote this the night you heard it. I have a good memory for words, Rue said. I've been reading signs and discarded newspapers for 7 weeks because there's nothing else to do. I didn't want to forget what he said. So I wrote it down, all of it. Halftone had stopped typing. He stood up, walked over, read the margin notes. And that's when the room changed, he said quietly. He looked at Gideon. You seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah, Gideon said. I'm seeing evidence. Brimstone killed the welder, pushed his mask up, walked over, read the map, read it twice. He said same conversation I had with Marcus, he read aloud. Who's Marcus? Marcus Briley, Rue said. Her voice was smaller now. Previous foster ward under Randall's care. He died in March 2021. Official cause was accidental overdose. But Marcus didn't use. He told me that himself the first week I was there. He warned me about Randall. I didn't understand what he meant until I was hiding in that hallway. The room was silent except for the radio. Some song about highways and leaving, and none of the men in that garage were listening to it anymore. Gideon picked up the road map carefully. 2 hands, like it was something that mattered. Folded it exactly as she'd had it. Set it back in front of her. Didn't take it. Didn't tell her he'd keep it safe. Let it stay hers. I worked DCS intake for 6 years, Gideon said. His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath it was something that sounded like old rage. I know exactly what Randall Sykes is. I know what the file he built on you is for. And I know that a roadmap with that conversation written in the margins is evidence, you hear me? That's evidence. He paused, looked at Knotwood, at Brimstone, at Halftone. Some communication passed between them that required no words. Then he looked back at Rue. You're not going back, he said. That's not a maybe, that's what happens next. Rue's hands were shaking. She put the map back in her backpack, zipped it closed. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't break. Why would you help me? You don't know me. No. Because I was 11 years old and homeless and nobody helped, Gideon said simply. Because my father is alive right now, because you didn't walk past. Because you're 15 years old, and you've been sleeping outside for 7 weeks while the system that was supposed to protect you let a predator keep cashing checks with your name on them. He stood up. Brimstone, you got medical training. I need you to look at that bruise on her temple and those marks on her arm. Document what you see. Halftone, pull everything you can find on Randall Sykes. Financials, court filings, previous cases. Knotwood, I need you to make some calls. Quiet ones. Find me someone in the state attorney's office who isn't going to kick this back to DCS. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, put it on speaker. 3 rings. A voice answered, gravelly, half asleep. Copperhead, it's 2 a.m. Somebody better be dead or dying. Razorback, Gideon said. I need every brother within 50 miles at the clubhouse. Now. A pause. The sound of someone sitting up, becoming fully awake in the space of a breath. What's going on? 15-year-old girl. Been homeless for 7 weeks running from a DCS coordinator who's been stealing from her dead mother's trust fund and talking about making sure she's not a problem by January. We're not waiting for the system to take its time on this one. Another pause. Shorter. Say no more. We're coming. The line went dead. Gideon looked at Rue. You said you need to not be found. What you're about to learn is that when 89 Hell's Angels decide someone needs protecting, found stops being the problem. By dawn, 89 motorcycles lined the gravel lot behind the Clarkfield Hell's Angels clubhouse in perfect formation. Not scattered, not haphazard, disciplined rows, tight and practiced from years of riding together. Chrome gleaming in the early light. Leather cuts bearing the same insignia. Men and women who'd driven through the night from Clarkfield and Murfreesboro, who'd left warm beds and jobs and families because Copperhead had made one phone call and used one word, now. The rumble had started low, distant, like thunder on the horizon. Then it grew. 4 Harley-Davidsons at first, then 12, then 30, engines roaring in a rhythm that shook windows 3 blocks away and set off car alarms in the grocery store parking lot across the street. The sound of 89 engines cutting off almost in unison left a silence that felt heavy and expectant. Now you might be thinking, 89 Hell's Angels show up to a small Tennessee town, and the first move is confrontation, fists ready, chaos brewing. That's the story you've been sold about motorcycle clubs, isn't it? The leather, the patches, the reputation, it all adds up to violence in most people's minds. That's not what happened. What happened was this. Razorback, 61 years old, ex-Clarkfield County Sheriff's deputy with 22 years on the force, stood at the head of the briefing table with a legal pad and a pen. Brimstone had Rue's bruise and arm marks documented with time-stamped photographs and written descriptions that matched medical terminology for defensive wounds. Halftone had pulled 17 pages of financial records in 4 hours, court filings, trust documents, the Tennessee Youth Legacy Foundation's 990 form that was 1 page long, filed 9 months ago, with 0 activity and 1 director. Randall Sykes. The clubhouse, a converted warehouse with high ceilings, long tables, a kitchen that had fed hundreds of people over the years, was quiet, except for the sound of papers being passed, men and women reading, processing, connecting dots that formed a pattern so clear it was sickening. Gideon stood near the front, Rue sitting in a chair behind him. She'd slept for 3 hours on the couch in Knotwood's shop, the first real sleep she'd had in 7 weeks. Someone, she didn't know who, had left a clean sweatshirt and socks folded beside her when she woke up. The sweatshirt fit. The socks were warm. Small mercies that felt enormous. "We have 4 objectives," Razorback said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd run operations before, just under different patches. Objective 1. Secure Rue's safety legally. That means emergency custody order, protective placement, restraining order filed before Randall Sykes even knows we're moving. Objective 2. Evidence collection. We need witness statements from every person who saw something and did nothing, every person who tried to help and got shut down. Objective 3. Financial audit trail. Halftone's already found the trust irregularities. We need bank records, receipts, proof of where that money went. Objective 4. Make sure the system can't bury this. He looked around the room. 23 men and women from the Clarkfield chapter, 58 from Murfreesboro, 3 from Nashville who'd heard and showed up anyway. 84 people who had jobs to get to, families waiting at home, lives that didn't include spending a Tuesday morning in a clubhouse planning a legal operation. All in favor? Razorback asked. For a moment, nothing, just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then every single hand went up. Not a moment's hesitation, not a single dissenting voice. 84 people voting unanimously to help a girl they'd never met because the alternative was walking away. And walking away was the thing this club had been founded specifically to stop doing. The first witness was Patsy Drummond, 67, librarian at Clarkfield Public Library for 31 years. She sat in the clubhouse office with razorback and knotwood, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee someone had brought her, and when she spoke, her voice shook. "I saw her at the library for 3 weeks," Patsy said. "Almost every day. She'd come in when we opened, stay until we closed. She'd read everything. Pamphlets, newspapers, the community bulletin board. She was so quiet. I noticed her shoes. The left one was falling apart. I noticed she wore the same clothes every day. I noticed she never went to the bathroom for the first 2 hours, like she was rationing trips." "Did you ask her if she needed help?" Knotwood asked gently. Patsy's face crumpled. "I almost did. Twice. The first time I convinced myself she was just a kid who liked to read. The second time, I thought about calling social services, but then I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if I make trouble for some family who's just going through a hard time?" She looked down at her coffee. "I was going to ask her. I was waiting for the right moment. And then she saved that man's life, and I realized I'd been watching a child suffer for 3 weeks, and I'd done nothing." Her hands shook as she spoke. Her voice broke on the word nothing. She couldn't meet Razorback's eyes. "Did you see anyone else interact with her?" Razorback asked, writing notes in careful script. "The city council aide," Patsy said. "Garrett French. He was leaving a meeting one night, saw her sitting on the steps in the rain. He stopped, asked if she needed somewhere to be. She didn't answer, and he told her she couldn't loiter after hours. Then he just walked away. Watched from the warm side of the glass while she stood under that narrow overhang." Razorback wrote down the name. "Anyone else?" "The Women's Auxiliary from Clarkfield United Methodist," Patsy said, and now her voice had an edge to it. "They had their monthly meeting the same night, service planning meeting, 2 hours talking about how to better serve at-risk youth. 7 women walked right past her on their way out. One stopped, looked at her clothes, looked at her face, told her there was a shelter on Depot Street and that she really shouldn't be out here. It sends the wrong message." Patsy's jaw tightened. She patted Rue's arm once, then she got in her car and drove away with her friends. All of them insured, none of them looking back. The testimony went into the file. One more piece of evidence that the system didn't just fail Rue. The community had failed her, repeatedly, with opportunities and choices, and the decision that someone else would handle it. The second witness was Sandra Leach, 58, former foster parent who'd had her license revoked 3 years ago after filing a complaint against Randall Sykes for financial irregularities in a different case. She sat in the same office chair Patsy had occupied, but her posture was different, straight-backed, angry, vindicated. She'd been carrying documentation in a folder for 3 years, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. "I reported him in 2022, Sandra said. "I was fostering a boy, Tyler, 13 years old, and I noticed the monthly stipend amounts didn't match what the state guidelines said I should be receiving. I filed a formal complaint with DCS and the state licensing board. The investigation was assigned to Randall's supervisor." She paused. "A man named Bill Hendricks, personal friend of Randall's for 11 years, fishing buddies." "What happened to the investigation?" Razorback asked. "Closed within 6 weeks. Findings: complaint unsubstantiated, foster parent displaying concerning behavior. 3 months later, my foster license was revoked for unrelated compliance violations that appeared in my file for the first time during that review. I haven't fostered since." Her hands were steady on the folder, but her knuckles were white. "I knew what he was. I knew someone would get hurt. And I've been waiting 3 years for someone to listen. Razorback took the folder, opened it. Inside were copies of the original complaint, the investigation summary, the license revocation notice, and a spreadsheet Sandra had built herself, tracking the financial discrepancies across 4 different cases she'd had access to. "This is evidence," he said quietly. "I know it is," Sandra said. "I've known for 3 years. What I didn't know was whether anyone would care." While Razorback collected witness statements, Halftone was 3 tables over with his laptop, typing faster than seemed possible, pulling records that shouldn't have been accessible, but were if you knew where to look and how to ask. He called Razorback over. "You need to see this." On the screen, bank records for the Tennessee Youth Legacy Foundation. The foundation Randall had registered 9 months ago, the one with 0 public activity and 1 director. "Look at the account activity," Halftone said, pointing. 3 deposits. First one, $27,400 dated April 14th. Second one, $11,300 dated May 3rd. Third one, $5,000 dated November 2nd. Total $43,700, Razorback said. That matches what Rue said he'd been stealing. "Now look at the withdrawals." Halftone scrolled down. $27,400 to Ranger Boats, Inc., purchase of a Z521C bass fishing boat. $11,300 to Morrison Home Renovations for bathroom work. The $5,000 was cash withdrawal in Las Vegas. Razorback leaned closer. He documented it. The boat purchase is listed in the trust filing as therapeutic outdoor program equipment. The bathroom renovation is foster home facility improvement. The Las Vegas trip isn't documented at all. "And here's the part that should terrify everyone," Halftone said. He pulled up another document. This is the trust structure language, filed with the county probate court. In the event of Rue's death before age 18, the trust dissolves and distribution goes to a charitable entity named by the trustee. The charitable entity named Tennessee Youth Legacy Foundation. The room got very quiet. "If Rue dies," Razorback said slowly, "he gets $214,000 through a foundation he controls. Tax-free. No audit. No questions." "And there's precedent," Halftone said. He pulled up another file. "Marcus Briley, previous foster ward under Randall's care. Died March 2021, age 17. Official cause: accidental overdose. But look at this. Marcus was a crime victim before entering foster care. Eligible for Tennessee Criminal Injury Compensation Fund. Payout to designated administrator upon victim's death, $67,400. Administrator listed, Randall Sykes. Policy accessed 6 weeks after Marcus's death. The pattern was so clear it felt like being punched. Not 1 victim. 2. Not accident. Design. Brimstone walked over, read the screen over their shoulders. Marcus's friends told a school counselor he was scared of his placement. Counselor referred it to DCS. Who do you think the assigned coordinator was? Randall, Razorback said. File notes say, unfounded, student reported stable. Brimstone's voice was flat, controlled, but underneath was fury that had been building for hours. Marcus's aunt requested a case review. She was told she had no legal standing. Marcus's personal belongings were disposed of within 72 hours of his death. His phone was never recovered. Razorback closed his eyes briefly, opened them. We're not looking at one corrupt guardian. We're looking at a predator who's done this before and was about to do it again. At 11:47 a.m., 26 hours after Rue had saved Roy Merritt's life outside the Clarkfield Public Library, Razorback made a phone call to an attorney named Margaret Chen, a woman who'd worked juvenile advocacy for 18 years and had a reputation for taking cases other lawyers avoided. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. At the end of it, Margaret said 3 words: "I'll be there." By 1:15 p.m., Margaret had filed an emergency protective order on Rue's behalf. By 2:30, she'd submitted a motion for emergency custody transfer from Randall Sykes to temporary state wardship pending investigation. By 3 p.m., Clarkfield County Sheriff's Department had been notified of credible allegations of financial exploitation, child endangerment, and suspected involvement in a previous ward's suspicious death. The sheriff, a man named Dale Kimmons, who'd worked with Razorback years ago and knew when to listen, assigned 2 detectives to the case. Not the usual process, not the usual timeline. But when 89 Hells Angels show up with documented evidence, witness statements, and a timeline that gives an endangered minor 11 days before a legal deadline makes her expendable, usual stops being the priority. At 4:38 p.m., Detective Sarah Vance and Detective Marcus Wu arrived at 2847 Westbrook Lane, Clarkfield, the home address for Randall Sykes. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd stolen $43,700 while his ward slept in drainage tunnels. 4 bedrooms, newly renovated bathroom with granite counters, a bass fishing boat parked in the driveway under a protective cover. When they knocked, Randall Sykes answered wearing reading glasses and a cardigan. He was holding a book, a Tom Clancy novel, bookmarked halfway through. The TV was on in the background, a football game, volume low. He looked confused, mildly annoyed, like a man interrupted during a normal Sunday afternoon. "Can I help you?" he asked. Detective Vance showed her badge. "Randall Sykes, we need you to come with us. We have questions regarding Rue Calloway and irregularities in the management of her trust fund." Randall's face didn't change much, a slight tightening around the eyes, a pause that lasted 2 seconds too long. "Rue is a runaway minor with documented emotional instability. I filed a report the day she disappeared. If you've found her, I'm happy to cooperate with her safe return." His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a concerned guardian who'd been doing his best with a difficult case. He'd used this voice before, with teachers, with social workers, with police. It had always worked. "We'll discuss that at the station," Detective Wu said. "You can come voluntarily, or we can make this formal." Randall set down his book carefully, marked the page. "Am I being arrested?" "Not yet," Vance said. "But we have evidence that requires immediate clarification. We'd like you to come in now." Randall looked at the 2 detectives, at the patrol car visible in his driveway, at the neighbors who were starting to notice activity. He was calculating, weighing options, deciding if cooperation or resistance served him better. He chose cooperation. Put on his jacket, locked his door, walked to the patrol car with the unhurried pace of a man who believed this was a misunderstanding that would be cleared up as soon as he explained things properly to people who would listen to reason. What he didn't know yet, what he wouldn't understand until he sat in interview room 2 at the Clarkfield County Sheriff's Department, and Detective Vance laid out 17 pages of financial records, witness statements, and a gas station roadmap with his own words written in the margins, was that 89 people had decided reason was done. Evidence was what mattered now. And they had evidence. The interview lasted 4 hours. Randall went through phases. Charm first, the reasonable man explaining complex systems to people who didn't understand child services. When that failed, legal threat, His attorney would bury this in litigation. He had relationships with people who mattered. This was false imprisonment. When the FBI agent walked in, a woman named Reese Moreno, who'd been building a case on child welfare fraud across 3 counties for 8 months. Randall's face changed. Not dramatically, just a small shift. The first moment he understood the scale. Agent Moreno sat down, opened her own folder, and said 6 words. "Tell me about Marcus Briley's phone." Randall went very still. "Because we have testimony that his phone was never recovered after his death," Moreno continued. "We have testimony that his belongings were disposed of within 72 hours. We have financial records showing you accessed $67,000 from a victim compensation fund 6 weeks after a ward in your care died of an overdose, despite that ward having no documented drug history prior to your placement." She laid out a photograph. Not of Marcus, of another child. A girl, maybe 14, standing in what looked like a foster home living room. "This is Kayla Henderson," Moreno said. "Died in your care in 2019. Official cause: complications from pneumonia. I'm sure that's what the death certificate says. What it doesn't say is that her medical records show she was denied treatment for the first 48 hours of her illness. What it doesn't say is that you accessed a $32,000 settlement from her biological father's estate 4 months after her death." Randall's hands were on the table. They'd been relaxed. Now they were pressed flat, fingers spread. "We've been building this case for 8 months, Moreno said. "What we didn't have was the through line, the pattern documentation, the financial motive laid out clearly enough for prosecution. Then a 15-year-old girl saved a stranger's life and asked for help from someone who actually listened. And suddenly we have everything." Randall said nothing. The performance was over. What sat in that chair now was something smaller, more frightened, more real. "How many?" Moreno asked. Randall looked at his hands, said nothing. "3 that we can prove so far," Moreno said. "Kayla, Marcus, and the attempted elimination of Rue. How many more?" Silence. Outside interview room 2, in the observation area, Razorback stood with Detective Vance and 4 other brothers from the club. They watched through the one-way glass as Randall Sykes, licensed foster care coordinator, food bank board member, scout troop leader, neighborhood watch captain, the man everyone trusted, sat in a chair and said nothing because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't make it worse. But Randall Sykes wasn't the ending. He was the door. When Halftone pulled Randall's phone records, not the personal phone, the work phone issued by Clarkfield County DCS, he found something that should have been routine and turned out to be a map. 47 calls over 8 months to a number registered to a man named Douglas Phelan, administrator at Clarkfield County Probate Court, the office that processed trust fund paperwork, the office that approved guardian appointments, the office that had rubber-stamped every single one of Randall's filings without question. 1 call, 2 days after Rue disappeared. Duration: 11 minutes. Another call, the day Randall filed the motion for permanent trustee status. Duration: 6 minutes, a third call, dated 3 days ago, the same day Rue had been sitting on library steps, trying to decide if she had another week in her. Duration: 4 minutes. Halftone pulled up the audio. The calls had been recorded automatically by the county system. routine compliance procedure that nobody thought to disable, because nobody thought they'd need to hide anything. He played the most recent one. Randall's voice. "We need to expedite the permanent trustee filing. The window closes in 8 days. Phelan's voice. "You're certain about the timeline?" Randall. "February audit is firm. If the filing isn't approved before then, questions get asked. You know how this works." Phelan. "Same structure as the Henderson case?" Randall. "Exactly the same. Foundation receives, you process the distribution paperwork, we split according to prior arrangement." A pause. Phelan. "And the minor?" Randall. "She's been gone 7 weeks. Exposure risk increases daily. Natural attrition solves problems the system can't." The recording ended. Razorback looked at Halftone. "He has a partner." "Not a partner," Halftone said quietly. "An infrastructure." The clubhouse had transformed into an operations center. 3 laptops open, documents spread across 2 tables, a whiteboard someone had brought in now covered with names, dates, dollar amounts, connecting lines that formed a web nobody wanted to see but couldn't look away from. Halftone pulled up financial records for the Clarkfield County Probate Court Office, cross-referencing processing dates with trust distributions. "Look at this pattern," he said, narrating in real time while 6 brothers crowded around the screen. "Every trust Randall managed goes through the same administrative path. Filed by Randall, processed by Phelan, approved without standard review. 3 cases in the past 4 years. He clicked through files. Case 1. Kayla Henderson, 2019. Trust value $84,000. Guardian, Randall Sykes. Died of pneumonia complications at age 14. Trust dissolved. Distributed to charitable foundation. Processing administrator, Douglas Phelan. Timeline between death and distribution. 9 weeks. Click. Next file. Case 2. Marcus Briley, 2021. No trust fund, but Criminal Injury Compensation Fund payout $67,400. Beneficiary administrator Randall Sykes. Died of accidental overdose at age 17. Payout processed 6 weeks after death. Processing administrator Douglas Phelan. Click. Next file. Case 3. Rue Calloway. Current. Trust value $214,000. Guardian Randall Sykes. Still alive because she ran, but filing for permanent trustee status was submitted November 3rd. Processing administrator assigned Douglas Phelan. Approval deadline 8 days from now. Razorback leaned over, reading the financial trail. Same pattern, same administrator, same gap between incident and payout that gives it just enough distance to look clean. Total dollar amount across all 3 cases, Halftone said, pulling up a calculator. $365,400. If we assume a 60-40 split between Randall and Phelan based on standard kickback structures, Phelan's take would be approximately $146,000 over 4 years. Brimstone, who'd been silent, spoke from near the whiteboard. You don't build a system like this for 3 cases. You build it because you've done it before, and you plan to do it again. So we find out how many times before, Razorback said. Halftone's fingers were already moving across the keyboard. Give me 2 hours. He took 90 minutes. When he called everyone back to the table, his face was drawn. I pulled every probate case Phelan processed in the past 6 years, where the ward was a minor. The guardian was DCS appointed. and the case resulted in early trust distribution due to death or disappearance of the minor. He turned the laptop screen around. 7 cases, 7 names, 7 children, 3 of them dead. 2 disappeared, never found. 2 still alive, but aging out of system with nothing. Total value of assets processed through Douglas Phelan's office, $1.2 million. Nobody spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle idled and cut off, and every person in that room understood, without saying it out loud, that they weren't just trying to save Rue. They were trying to stop something that had been killing children for 6 years while wearing the face of public service. Douglas Phelan was 51 years old, married, father of 2, member of Clarkfield Community Church, volunteer youth soccer coach. His office at the Clarkfield County Probate Court was small but organized. Family photos on the desk. A plaque from the Tennessee Association of Court Administrators recognizing 15 years of service. When Razorback and Gideon walked into his office at 8:45 a.m., no appointment, no warning, Phelan looked up from his computer with the mild confusion of someone whose day had just been interrupted by something unexpected. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked. Razorback closed the door. Gideon stood in front of it. "We need to talk about Randall Sykes," Razorback said, "and the 7 minors whose trust funds you helped him steal over the past 6 years." The color drained from Phelan's face. Not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. They'd been resting on the desk. Now they were gripping the armrests of his chair. Razorback pulled a folder from his jacket, set it on the desk, opened it to the first page. The phone call transcript. "This is you, 11:47 p.m., 3 days ago, telling Randall Sykes you'd process the distribution paperwork according to prior arrangement. Same structure as the Henderson case. Your words." Phelan stared at the transcript. "You have 2 choices," Razorback said, his voice quiet, flat, the voice of someone who'd given this speech before in different contexts. "Tell me everything. From the beginning, every case, every dollar, every child, or I make 1 phone call to the FBI agent who's already building a case, and you answer to people with far less patience than I have right now." Phelan's hands were shaking visibly now. He looked at the closed door, at Gideon standing in front of it, at the transcript on his desk. "I want my attorney." "You're welcome to call them," Razorback said. "The FBI is going to want to talk to them anyway. But here's what you need to understand. Randall's already in custody. He's already talking. And whoever talks first, whoever cooperates first, gets the better deal. That's how this works." Phelan looked at the family photos on his desk. His daughter's soccer team picture, his son's school portrait. He was calculating something, but it wasn't whether to talk. It was whether he could save anything from what was about to happen. "I didn't know," he said finally. His voice was small. "Not at first. Not with Kayla. Randall said it was standard trust distribution, that the foundation was legitimate. I processed it like any other case." "But then you knew," Gideon said from the door. Phelan closed his eyes. "Marcus. When Marcus died, and the same pattern repeated, same language in the filing, same foundation receiving funds, same timeline, I asked Randall directly. He said the system was broken, that these kids were going to fail anyway, that we were just making sure the money went somewhere useful instead of getting lost in bureaucracy. And you believed that, Razorback said. Not a question. I wanted to believe it, Phelan said. His voice broke. Because the alternative was, I couldn't. I have kids. I coach soccer. I'm not. He stopped, started again. He paid me. Not much at first. 10% of each distribution. He said it was administrative fees, consulting work. By the time I understood what it really was, I was already complicit, Gideon finished. Phelan nodded, put his face in his hands. This was the part that made Gideon's chest heavy. Not Randall, the predator who'd made a calculation and executed it with precision. That was easy to understand, easy to categorize as evil. This was harder. This was a man who could have stopped it, who saw it, who understood what was happening to children in his own community, and chose not to act because the alternative meant admitting his own guilt, losing his job, facing his family with the truth of what he'd become. How many did you process? Razorback asked. 7, Phelan whispered. Over 6 years. I have the files. All of them. I kept copies because, I don't know why. Insurance, maybe. Proof that I wasn't the only one. Where are they? Phelan opened his desk drawer, pulled out a thumb drive, held it out with a shaking hand. Razorback took it. You're going to write down every detail you remember, every conversation, every dollar amount, every case. And then you're going to come with us to the FBI field office, and you're going to repeat all of it on the record. You understand? Phelan nodded. Because here's what you need to know, Razorback said, leaning forward slightly. 3 children are dead. 2 are missing. Rue Calloway is alive because she ran, and because she got lucky. That's the legacy you helped build. That's what you enabled while you coached soccer, and went to church, and told yourself you weren't doing anything wrong. Phelan was crying now, silent tears running down his face, and neither Razorback nor Gideon felt anything resembling sympathy. Agent Reese Moreno arrived at the clubhouse at 2:30 p.m. Plain clothes, practical shoes, a face that had spent 8 months working a case and hitting walls made of bureaucracy and jurisdictional limitations. She was not warmly welcomed, and she did not expect to be. Gideon met her at the door, did not extend his hand. Agent Moreno. Mr. Merritt, she said, I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Depends on what you're investigating. Randall Sykes, Douglas Phelan. Systemic child welfare fraud across Clarkfield County. Gideon looked at Razorback. Some decision was made without words. He stepped aside. Come in. The clubhouse was full, not 89 anymore. Some had gone back to work, but still 43 brothers and sisters who'd stayed to see this through. When Agent Moreno walked in, the room didn't go silent. It went watchful. She sat down at the briefing table. Gideon sat across from her. Between them, the thumb drive from Phelan's office, 17 pages of financial records, witness statements, the roadmap with Rue's handwriting in the margins, and time-stamped photographs of bruises that told their own story. How long has your office known about Randall Sykes? Gideon asked. Moreno met his eyes. 8 months. We've been building a financial fraud case. Wire fraud, embezzlement of federal funds, conspiracy. The elements were there, but we couldn't connect them cleanly enough for prosecution. We had patterns, but we needed documentation. We needed witnesses who'd testify. We needed the through line that proved intent. 8 months, Gideon said quietly. Rue's been in his placement for 13 months. She's been running for 7 weeks. You had 8 months. The statement sat between them. Moreno didn't look away. We built it legally, she said. By the book, through proper channels. And while we built it, she was still in that house. We got her out in 18 hours, Gideon said. You had 8 months. Moreno had no good response to that. She didn't try to manufacture one. Gideon pushed the evidence across the table. One piece at a time. The thumb drive, the financial records, the phone transcripts, the road map last, unfolded carefully, the margins visible. Moreno reviewed each item. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. She stopped writing. Set down her pen. Leaned forward. "This fills a gap we haven't been able to close," she said quietly. "We had the financial trail. We didn't have the victim testimony. We didn't have the documentary evidence of intent. We didn't have the connection to previous deaths." She looked at the road map, read Rue's handwriting. "If this is authenticated, it changes the scope significantly. This isn't just fraud. This is a RICO case. Conspiracy, pattern of racketeering, multiple victims across years, federal charges that carry 20 to 30 years minimum." "We have one condition," Gideon said. Moreno waited. "Rue gets a victim advocate assigned before anyone interviews her. Nobody talks to her without her asking first. And the second arrest happens today, not after another week of paperwork. Today." Moreno considered this. "I can agree to the advocate and the interview terms. The arrest warrant for Phelan can be expedited to today if he's cooperating. If he's not, it's 48 hours minimum." "He's cooperating," Razorback said from across the room. "He's writing his confession now." Moreno stood, collected the evidence carefully. "We'll be in touch. This case is going to move fast now." "Agent Moreno," Gideon said. She turned. "You do right by her." A beat. "That's the job." After the agent left, Razorback stood at the whiteboard, looking at the web of names and numbers and connections. He spoke without turning around, his voice carrying to everyone in the room. "The system wasn't broken. That's the thing people get wrong. A broken system could be fixed. This one worked exactly as designed, built to move slowly, to require proof beyond doubt, to protect the rights of the accused even at the cost of the victim's time. Nobody built it to be cruel. It just turned out that way sometimes, when the person inside it needed saving faster than the paperwork could catch up." He turned to face the room. "We didn't replace the system. We bought the time the system needed to work. That's the difference." By 5 p.m., all evidence was assembled. Halftone printed the final summary, 3 pages that told a story nobody wanted to read but everyone needed to see. Victims identified: Kayla Henderson, deceased, 2019. $84,000, Marcus Briley, deceased, 2021. $67,400, Jasmine Torres, disappeared, 2020. $48,000, David Chen, disappeared, 2022. $31,000. Rue Calloway, survived. $214,000, attempted. 2 additional cases pending verification. Total financial impact: $1,247,000 stolen or attempted theft. Timeline of operation: 6 years, 2018 to 2024. Systemic failures documented. 14 separate incident reports dismissed by DCs. 7 witness complaints filed. 0 meaningful investigations. 3 previous attempts to report Randall Sykes, all buried internally. 1 whistleblower, Sandra Leach, punished with license revocation charges filed. Federal. Wire fraud, 7 counts. Conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, RICO predicate acts, endangerment of minors, 4 counts, conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts, pending evidence review. Charges filed. State, grand theft, embezzlement of trust funds, 7 counts, child endangerment, 5 counts, filing false official documents, obstruction of justice. Razorback read it aloud. Every number landed like a stone. When he finished, the room was silent. 7 victims, $1.2 million stolen over 6 years. And for 6 years, a system designed to catch exactly this evil looked the way. Not because it couldn't see, because the people inside it chose not to. He set down the paper. But 3 children are still alive. 2 are missing, but now we have names and resources to find them. And Rue Calloway is safe. That's not justice yet. But it's the beginning. 3 days after Randall Sykes was arrested in his driveway while holding a Tom Clancy novel, Rue Calloway sat in a medical examination room at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, the same hospital where her mother had died 13 months ago. The walls were the same pale green. The smell was the same. Antiseptic and floor wax and something underneath that smelled like worry. Brimstone sat in the waiting room with a book he wasn't reading and a bag from the hospital cafeteria containing a turkey sandwich, apple slices, and a chocolate chip cookie. He'd thought ahead. When Rue had asked why he was coming with her, he'd said simply, "Because nobody should go to a doctor alone." He didn't ask if she wanted company. He just showed up, and somehow that made it easier to accept. The doctor, Dr. Annette Pryor, pediatric medicine, 41 years old, the kind of person who looked you in the eye when she talked, had reviewed Rue's intake blood work and wasn't hiding her concern. "Your hemoglobin is 9.2, Dr. Pryor said, sitting on the rolling stool at knee height so she wasn't looking down. "Normal range for your age is 12 to 15. You're clinically anemic. Your white blood cell count suggests your immune system has been under significant stress. Your BMI is 16.6, which puts you in the underweight category for your height and age." Rue sat very still on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath her. She'd heard medical terminology before, in this same building, when doctors had used careful voices to tell her that her mother's heart had stopped responding to treatment. "What does that mean?" Rue asked quietly. "It means your body has been running on empty for too long," Dr. Pryor said. "The good news is that you're here now, and everything I just described is fixable with proper nutrition, rest, and monitoring. We're going to start you on iron supplements today. I want you eating 3 balanced meals a day: protein, vegetables, carbohydrates. I want you sleeping in a warm, safe place every night. And I want to see you back here in 2 weeks for follow-up blood work." She paused, looked at Rue's chart, then back at Rue. "You saved someone's life with CPR while your own body was shutting down from malnutrition. That tells me you're a lot stronger than these numbers suggest. But strength doesn't mean you don't need help. Understand?" Rue nodded. Her throat was tight. Dr. Pryor stood, made a note in the chart. "The nurse will bring your prescriptions and some information about nutrition. And Rue?" She waited until Rue looked up. "Thank you for getting here when you did. A lot of kids in your situation don't make it this far." When Rue walked back into the waiting room, Brimstone looked up from his book, saw her face, and stood without asking questions. He handed her the cafeteria bag. "Turkey sandwich. Hospital food's terrible, but the cookies are decent." They sat in the waiting room for 20 minutes while the prescriptions were filled. Rue ate the sandwich slowly, then the apple slices, then finally the cookie. She didn't realize how hungry she was until the food was gone, and she was wishing there was more. "Doctor say you're okay?" Brimstone asked. "She said everything's fixable," Rue replied. "Good." He closed his book. "Then we fix it." That night, back at the clubhouse, someone had organized dinner. Not a meeting, not an event, just food, because Rue needed to eat, and the brothers had learned that eating alone felt different than eating with people who weren't going to take the plate away. The long tables were set with mismatched dishes. Someone's wife had brought lasagna again. There were breadsticks from the Italian place on 5th Street. A salad that looked like it had been assembled by someone who'd Googled, "What vegetables do teenagers eat?" And a sheet cake that said, "Welcome home, Rue," in blue frosting that was slightly smudged where someone had transported it too quickly. Rue stood at the entrance, backpack still on both shoulders, and stared at the cake. Nobody had ever written her name on a cake before, not even at birthdays. "You allergic to anything?" Knotwood asked, appearing beside her with a plate already loaded with food. "Because if you are, we need to know now before you eat half this stuff." "I'm not allergic," Rue said quietly. "Good. Sit down. Eat. And if anyone asks you questions you don't want to answer, you just look at me and I'll change the subject to motorcycle carburetors. Works every time." She sat. The plate was set in front of her. Lasagna, breadstick, salad with ranch dressing already on it because someone had noticed she'd eaten ranch on her salad yesterday. The smell alone made her stomach clench with want. She ate without watching the door, without timing how long the meal was taking, without calculating how much she could save for later, because later might not have food. She just ate. And when her plate was empty, someone asked if she wanted more, and she said yes. And more appeared. The conversation around her was normal. Someone arguing about a football game, someone else complaining about a transmission that wouldn't cooperate, laughter from the far end of the table about something Rue didn't catch but didn't need to. She was just there, part of the fabric of this gathering, and nobody was asking her to prove she belonged. When the meal ended and people started clearing dishes, Rue helped, picked up plates, carried them to the kitchen, scraped food into the trash because that's what you did after a meal. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of thing she hadn't done in 49 days. The sound of plates being stacked, water running in the sink, someone humming while they dried dishes. And underneath it all, the quiet knowledge that she didn't have to leave when this was done. That there was a place to sleep tonight that wasn't a drainage tunnel or a library step or a doorway behind a hardware store. Margaret Chen, the attorney who'd taken Rue's case, had moved faster than the system typically allowed. Emergency protective order granted. Temporary custody transferred to state wardship with specific placement restrictions. No DCS coordinator involvement, third-party oversight required, monthly check-ins mandatory. But state wardship meant group home by default. And group homes meant shared rooms and rigid schedules, and the kind of institutional living that felt too much like the system that had failed her in the first place. Gideon had made a phone call instead. To his sister, Diana Merritt Kowalski, 49 years old, high school English teacher, divorced, 2 kids in college, rattling around a 4-bedroom house in East Clarkfield that had too many empty rooms and not enough life in it since her youngest had left for school in August. The conversation had lasted 6 minutes. At the end of it, Diana had said, "Bring her over. Let's see if this works." The house was a 2-story craftsman on a quiet street with a front porch that had a swing and flower boxes that had been maintained into November. Diana met them at the door wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and when she looked at Rue, she didn't do the thing most adults did, the quick scan for damage, the assessment, the pity. She just smiled. "You must be Rue. I'm Diana. Come in before the heat escapes." The interior was warm, lived in, comfortable in the way homes are comfortable when people have actually lived in them for years. Books on shelves, photographs on walls, a cat that appeared from nowhere and wound itself around Rue's legs before disappearing again. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Diana said. "I put clean sheets on the bed this morning, cleared out the closet, set out some towels. The bathroom's across the hall. You don't need to ask permission to use it, or to get food from the kitchen, or to exist in this house. Those are just things you do because you live here now." Rue stood very still, backpack on both shoulders. "Do you want to see it?" Diana asked gently. Rue nodded. The room was medium-sized, painted a soft gray blue, with a bed that had a white quilt and more pillows than one person needed. A desk by the window, a bookshelf that was empty, waiting, a closet with the door open, showing hangers and space. Rue set her backpack down for the first time in 49 days. Actually set it down, on the floor, away from her body. "The brothers raised $42,000, Diana said from the doorway, not coming in, letting Rue have the space. "From chapters across Tennessee. It's in a trust account Margaret set up, separate from your mother's trust, completely protected. It's for your education, your future, whatever you need it for. First month's expenses here are covered. So are clothes, school supplies, anything else. You don't owe anyone anything for being here. That's important. This isn't charity. This is family." Rue's hands were shaking. She looked at the bed, the desk, the window that had curtains, and let in light. "I don't know how to," she started, then stopped. "You don't have to know how to anything," Diana said quietly. "You just have to be here. That's all. Just be here and let yourself be safe." Rue sat down on the bed. The mattress was soft. The quilt smelled like lavender detergent, and for the first time in 7 weeks, she cried. Not the silent crying she'd taught herself in doorways, real crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and couldn't be controlled or quieted or hidden. Diana sat down beside her. Didn't touch, didn't crowd, just sat there while Rue cried herself empty. And when it was done, when Rue had nothing left, Diana handed her a tissue box and said, "There's soup on the stove if you're hungry later. I'll be downstairs." She left, closing the door partway. Not all the way. Just enough for privacy, but not enough to feel locked in. Rue lay down on the bed, still in her clothes, still in her shoes with the flapping sole. She stared at the ceiling. She counted her breaths. And somewhere between breath 47 and breath 50, she fell asleep without meaning to. The kind of sleep that comes when the body finally understands it's allowed to stop fighting. 3 days later, when Rue had eaten 9 full meals, slept in a real bed for 72 hours, and started to believe this might be permanent, the brothers came to say goodbye. Not all 89, but the core group, the ones who'd been there from the beginning. They showed up at Diana's house in the evening, 5 motorcycles parked in a neat row at the curb. And when Diana opened the door, Gideon said simply, "We wanted to check in." They sat in the living room, Gideon, razorback, brimstone, knotwood and halftone, drinking coffee Diana had made, and Rue sat in the armchair by the window, wearing clean clothes Diana had bought, her hair washed, her face less hollow than it had been a week ago. "School's arranged," Knotwood said. "Diana worked it out with Clarkfield High. You start Monday if you're ready. If you're not, you wait. No pressure." "Therapy's set up," Brimstone added. "Woman named Dr. Sarah Greenway. Specializes in trauma, works with teens. First appointment is Thursday. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. You just show up." Halftone leaned forward, pulled out his phone, handed it to her. "This is yours. Prepaid, no contract. My number's in there. Gideon's, Diana's, Margaret's, Dr. Greenway's office. You need anything? Anytime. You call. I mean it. 3 a.m, doesn't matter." Rue took the phone carefully, like it might break. Razorback spoke last. "Randall's bail hearing is next week. Margaret will be there. You don't have to be. He's not getting out. We made sure of that. But if you want to see him face consequences, you have that right." "I don't want to see him," Rue said quietly. "Then you don't," Razorback said. "That's your choice. That's always your choice now." They stood to leave. One by one, they said goodbye in their own way. Knotwood crouched down to her eye level, the same way he'd done the first night. "You did good, kid. You saved a life, you survived 7 weeks alone, and you asked for help when you needed it. That's 3 kinds of brave most people never manage once." Brimstone clasped her shoulder once, gently. "You keep eating, keep sleeping, keep showing up. The rest takes care of itself." Halftone just nodded, but his eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. Razorback paused at the door. "You know where we are? You know how to find us. That doesn't change." Gideon was last. He stood in the doorway, this man who'd been homeless at 11, who'd quit a job he loved because the system broke his heart, who'd built a family out of brothers and leather, and the choice to never walk past someone who needed help. "I was you once," he said quietly. "Invisible. Scared. Trying to survive one day at a time. Nobody helped. I learned to live with that. But you don't have to live with that because you're not invisible anymore. You hear me?" Rue nodded. Her voice was small but steady. "I hear you." "Good." He pulled something from his pocket, a small brass key on a simple chain. "This is to the clubhouse. You want to come by, work on motorcycles, just sit and read whatever, you come by. You're family now. That's not temporary." He set the key on the table beside her. Didn't make her take it. Just left it there as proof. Then they left, 5 motorcycles pulling away from the curb in formation, engines rumbling into the evening, and Rue stood at the window watching them go, until the sound faded completely. Diana appeared beside her. "They're good people." "They saved my life," Rue said. "No," Diana said gently. "You saved Roy's life. They just made sure you didn't have to keep saving your own." 2 weeks after the last brother's motorcycle faded into the evening, Gideon Merritt stood outside Roy's hospital room at Vanderbilt Medical Center and watched through the narrow window in the door. His father was sitting up in bed, physical therapy assessment paperwork on the rolling table, arguing with the occupational therapist about whether he really needed to practice using a fork with his left hand when his right hand worked fine. "The stroke affected your right side," the therapist was saying patiently. "We're building backup systems." "My backup system is not eating foods that require forks," Roy replied. The therapist sighed, made a note, and caught Gideon smiling through the window. She came out, shook her head. "Your father is the most stubborn patient I've had in 11 years. "That's why he's alive," Gideon said. The neurologist had been clear. If Rue hadn't called 911 when she did, if she hadn't known to check for stroke symptoms, if she hadn't kept Roy calm and still until the ambulance arrived, the outcome would have been different. Not might have been, would have been. The clot had been caught in the narrow window where intervention still mattered. Roy would need physical therapy for 6 months. His speech had a slight hesitation now, words catching sometimes before they released. His right hand grip was weaker, but he was alive, arguing about forks, planning to attend his grandson's birthday party next month. All because a homeless 15-year-old girl had memorized a poster while her mother was dying and chose to use that knowledge when a stranger needed it. Gideon didn't go into the room. He stood outside, watching his father through the glass, and felt something that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite gratitude. It was the understanding that the world balanced on choices. Small ones, made in moments when nobody was watching, by people who had every reason to keep walking, and chose not to. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a message Rue had sent yesterday. Started school today. It was weird, but okay. Thank you for everything. He didn't reply. Just read it twice, saved it, and put the phone away. Outside the hospital, he stood by his motorcycle for a long time. The November air was cold enough that his breath made clouds. He checked his mirrors once, looked back at the building where his father was arguing about forks and winning, and thought about how different this would look if one girl had been too afraid to get involved. He started the bike. The engine caught and rumbled. He pulled out onto the street and rode home. 6 months turned Clarkfield into a different town. Not dramatically. The changes were small, cumulative, the kind that only showed up when you looked back and realized how much distance had been covered. Rue Calloway passed her first semester at Clarkfield High with a 3.7 GPA. Made honor roll. Joined the library volunteer program, shelving books on Tuesday afternoons because libraries still felt like safe places and she wanted to give back. Her English teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, noticed she had a gift for writing. Not creative writing, but the kind of clear, precise documentation that told true stories without embellishment, and suggested she consider journalism. She started eating lunch with 2 other girls, Maya and Claire, who didn't ask about where she'd been before she showed up mid-year. They just accepted her presence the way Rue was learning to accept that sometimes people were kind without needing a reason. The nightmares came less frequently. Not gone. Healing didn't work that way, but manageable. Dr. Greenway had taught her grounding techniques, ways to pull herself back when the fear tried to take over. She'd learned that trauma left marks, but didn't have to write the whole story. On a Saturday in May, Rue walked into the Hells Angels clubhouse for the first time since she'd slept on Knotwood's couch 7 months ago. The brass key Gideon had given her was on a chain around her neck, worn smooth from months of her running her thumb over it when she needed the reminder that she had somewhere to go. The garage bay was open. 3 motorcycles in various states of repair, and Knotwood was at the workbench doing exactly what he'd been doing the first night. Disassembling a carburetor with the precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. He looked up when she entered. "Hey, kid. Long time." "I wanted to see if the offer still stood," Rue said, "about learning how to work on motorcycles." Knotwood smiled, gestured to the stool beside him. "Hand me that socket wrench and let's find out if you're any good at this." She was. Not naturally gifted, not instantly skilled, but willing to learn, patient enough to repeat things until she got them right, and unafraid to ask questions. By the end of the afternoon, she'd successfully removed and cleaned a carburetor under Knotwood's supervision, and her hands were covered in grease she didn't bother wiping off immediately because it felt like evidence of work that mattered. "You thinking about this as a career?" Knotwood asked, handing her a rag when they were done. "I don't know yet," Rue said honestly. "I just wanted to learn something useful, something I could do with my hands if everything else fell apart." Knotwood nodded. "Smart. Hope you never need it. But smart." Meanwhile, the legal machinery that had started moving 7 months ago finally produced results. Randall Sykes was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 12. wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, endangerment of minors. The judge had read the victim impact statements. Not just Rue's, but statements from Marcus Briley's aunt, from Kayla Henderson's former teacher, from the 2 disappeared children's families who'd never gotten closure. The sentencing had been covered by the Tennessean, by local news, by advocacy groups who used the case as evidence that the system needed reform. Douglas Phelan took a plea deal. 8 years, cooperation with ongoing investigations, permanent ban from public sector employment. He'd provided the evidence that connected 17 other cases across 3 counties, not all involving deaths, but all involving financial exploitation of vulnerable children in state care. The Clarkfield County DCS office was gutted. 12 employees fired or resigned. New oversight protocols implemented. Mandatory third-party audits for all trust funds and guardian appointments. Whistleblower protections strengthened. Sandra Leach got her foster license reinstated with a formal apology from the state licensing board. She took in 2 siblings within a month. Teenagers who'd aged out of group homes with nowhere else to go. She was older now, more careful, but still willing to show up. And the Hells Angels Tattoo. Clarkfield chapter had started something they called Angels Watch, a formal partnership with Margaret Chen's advocacy firm and 3 other counties' social services departments. Not replacing the system, working alongside it, brothers and sisters volunteering as mentors, providing emergency housing, teaching job skills, being the safety net for kids who fell through cracks that still existed no matter how many reforms passed. 3 more homeless teenagers had gone through the program in 6 months. All 3 had roofs over their heads, paychecks in their pockets, futures that looked nothing like the streets they'd left behind. It was working. Not perfectly. Nothing involving humans ever works perfectly. But it was working. And it had started because one homeless girl refused to let a stranger die on a sidewalk. 3 years is both forever and no time at all when you're 18 and standing at a crossroads. Rue Calloway graduated from Clarkfield High in June with honors. President of the student newspaper. Scholarship to Middle Tennessee State University for journalism, with a focus on investigative reporting. Her college essay had been about systems, not how they fail, but how they're built, who they're built to protect, and what happens when someone inside them decides to break the design. She'd been accepted to 5 schools. She chose MTSU because it was close enough to come home on weekends if she wanted to. Home. The word still felt strange sometimes, but less strange than it used to. The graduation party was at Diana's house. Family and friends and brothers who'd driven in from 3 counties to see the kid they'd fought for walk across a stage and collect a diploma that had seemed impossible 42 months ago. Gideon handed her an envelope. "From all of us. Don't open it now. Open it when you need it." Inside was a check for $8,000. Funds raised specifically for her first year of college expenses not covered by scholarship. A note attached in Razorback's careful handwriting. For textbooks, late-night study snacks, and the belief that education is the best revenge. Make us proud, the brothers. But the moment that changed everything happened 3 weeks later. Rue was volunteering at the Clarkfield Public Library, same library where she'd spent 49 days as a homeless teenager trying to stay warm, same steps where Roy Merritt had collapsed. Patsy Drummond had offered her a paid position, part-time through summer, and Rue had taken it because libraries still felt like sanctuary. She was shelving books in the young adult section when she noticed a girl, maybe 14, sitting in the periodicals corner, reading the same magazine she'd been reading an hour ago. Not reading it. Staring at it. The girl's clothes were clean but worn. Her backpack was overstuffed, bulging at the seams. She kept glancing toward the entrance, tracking every person who walked in, and when the hour reached 5:45, 15 minutes before closing, she moved toward the restroom, with the careful efficiency of someone who knew exactly how long she could stay before being asked to leave. Rue recognized the look. She'd worn it for 7 weeks. She knew what it felt like from the inside. That combination of terror and hope and exhaustion, the face of someone who'd been failed enough times to stop expecting anything but hadn't quite given up yet. She crossed the room. "Hey," Rue said softly. "You okay?" The girl looked up, startled, defensive. "I'm fine." "You've been here since 2, Rue said. Not accusing, just observing. "That's almost 4 hours, and you didn't go to the bathroom until right before we close, which means you're rationing trips. I know that pattern because I used to do the same thing." The girl's face shifted. Recognition, then wariness. "I don't need help." "I didn't ask if you needed help," Rue said gently. "I asked if you're okay. Those are different questions." A long silence. The girl looked at her backpack, at the exit, at Rue's face. "I left my placement 3 days ago," the girl said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "If I go to a shelter, they call DCS. If DCS finds me, I go back. I can't go back." Rue's chest tightened. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a contact, showed the screen to the girl. "This is Margaret Chen. She's an attorney who specializes in cases like yours. This is Gideon Merritt. He runs a program for kids in situations exactly like yours. And this is my number." She looked at the girl directly. "I was you. 3 years ago, I was sleeping in a drainage tunnel and hiding from a guardian who was stealing from my dead mother's trust fund. I got out because someone saw me and didn't walk past, so I'm not walking past you." The girl stared at the phone. "Why would you help me?" "Because someone helped me when I had nothing," Rue said simply. "And because you deserve better than this." She made the call. Gideon answered on the second ring. 15 minutes later, his motorcycle pulled into the library parking lot, and Rue walked the girl outside, stayed with her while Gideon explained what Angel's Watch could offer. Didn't leave until the girl agreed to go with him to somewhere safe. Before they left, the girl asked, "What happened to you? After someone helped?" Rue smiled. "I went to college. I learned that systems can be changed by people who understand them from the inside, and I decided to become the kind of person who shows up." She paused. "You're going to be okay. Not today, but eventually." She watched Gideon and the girl ride away, the motorcycle's rumble fading into the evening, and understood with perfect clarity what she was going to do with her degree, her voice, her knowledge of how things break and how they're fixed. She was going to tell stories, the true ones, the ones about children who fell through cracks and the people who caught them, the ones about systems that failed and communities that filled the gaps, the ones that proved courage didn't require power, just the decision to act when action mattered. Gideon Merritt kept a folder on his phone labeled "Why We Ride." He didn't show it to anyone. It was private, the way some prayers are private. Inside, messages from people he'd never met, whose sons or daughters or siblings had come home because of what the brothers did. Photographs of kids who'd graduated, gotten jobs, started families. Thank you notes written in uncertain handwriting. Media coverage of Angel's Watch expanding to 12 counties across Tennessee. And saved at the top, time-stamped 3 years ago, a message from a 15-year-old girl who'd written 6 words that started everything. I just need to not be found. He pulled into his driveway at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in late August. The house was quiet. His daughter was at college now. His father was home from the hospital and living independently again. His brothers were scattered across the county doing what they did. The world kept turning. He sat on his bike for a long moment, engine off, listening to the ticking sound of cooling metal. Thought about Rue walking into that library and recognizing herself in another child's face and choosing not to walk past. Thought about Roy arguing about forks and winning. Thought about 89 people who'd dropped everything because one phone call said now, and they understood what now meant. He'd learned something over 3 years of running Angel's Watch, something he couldn't have put into words at the beginning, but understood now with the clarity that comes from lived experience. The system wasn't the enemy. Indifference was. The moment you stopped seeing people, stopped asking uncomfortable questions, stopped believing your action mattered, that's when the system won. But every time someone chose to get involved, every time a person decided that one stranger's crisis was worth interrupting their day, the system had to bend, had to make room, had to acknowledge that the people inside it were stronger than the bureaucracy around it. He wasn't naive. He knew 3 years of work hadn't fixed everything. There were still children slipping through cracks, still predators hiding behind credentials, still 1,000 ways the vulnerable could be exploited by those who saw them as resources rather than people. But 17 kids had safe homes now who didn't 3 years ago. 5 predators were in prison who'd been free. 2 missing children had been found. And one girl who'd been invisible for 49 days was about to start college with a full scholarship and a future that looked nothing like the drainage tunnel she'd escaped from. That wasn't victory. That was just what happened when enough people decided not my problem was no longer an acceptable response to suffering they could see. He checked his mirrors one last time. Saw his reflection, older, tired, but still here. Still showing up. He went inside. Here's what Rue's story is actually about, underneath the surface. It's about the distance between seeing and acting. Every person who walked past her in those 49 days saw her. They just chose not to act. And that choice, that decision that someone else would handle it, that it wasn't their responsibility, that getting involved was too complicated, that choice is what allows predators like Randall Sykes to operate for 6 years while wearing the face of public service. If you have ever walked past someone who needed help because you convinced yourself someone else would step in, you already know what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen something wrong and stayed silent because speaking up felt too risky or too complicated, you understand the weight of that choice. Here's what you can do. Pay attention. When a child hesitates before answering a simple question, notice. When someone's story doesn't quite add up, ask the uncomfortable follow-up. When your instinct says something is wrong, trust it enough to investigate rather than dismiss. You don't need 89 motorcycles to change a story. You just need to be the one person who doesn't walk past. If this story moved you, subscribe right now and share it with someone who needs to remember that one choice made at the right moment can rewrite everything. Comment with the name of someone who saw you when you needed to be seen. Or tell me what you wish someone had done for you. Because visibility is what Rue never had until she proved she mattered. And every person matters. Every single one. More stories like this are coming. Stories about people who refused to be invisible and the communities that finally saw them. Stories that prove the scariest-looking people in a room are sometimes exactly who you need. Stay, subscribe, show up. 49 days. That's how long Rue Calloway was invisible in Clarkfield, Tennessee. Then she saved a stranger's life, whispered 6 words to a man in a Hell's Angels vest, and 89 people decided she mattered more than the system that had failed her. 3 years later, she walks into a library and sees herself in another child's face. And this time, she's the one who doesn't walk past. The cycle breaks when one person decides it breaks. Rue decided. Gideon decided. 89 brothers and sisters decided. The question is, what do you decide? Before you close this video, there are 3 things from Rue's story that could save a life in your community tomorrow. Not hypothetically. Actually save a life. So stay with me for 2 more minutes. First, F.A.S.T, the 4 letters that saved Roy Merritt. Rue knew stroke symptoms because she'd memorized a poster while her mother was dying. Most people don't know them until it's too late. Write this down. F is for face. Ask the person to smile. Does one side droop? A is for arms. Ask them to raise both arms. Does one drift down? S is for speech. Ask them to repeat a simple phrase. Is it slurred? T is for time. If you see any of these signs, call 911 immediately. Every minute during a stroke, nearly 2 million brain cells die. Rue called 911 within 60 seconds of seeing Roy's face change. That's why he's alive. That's why he got to argue with physical therapists about forks and attend his grandson's birthday party. If you're over 55, if you have aging parents, if you work with elderly people, learn F.A.S.T. Teach it to your family. Put it on your refrigerator. Because strokes don't announce themselves. They just happen, and the person next to you when it happens might be the only reason you survive. Second, 5 warning signs. We all missed. For 49 days, Rue was visible in Clarkfield. People saw her. They just didn't act. Here are the 5 signs that should trigger a phone call. 1. Clothing that doesn't match the season. Same outfit every day. Shoes falling apart. No coat in winter. 2. Unexplained injuries with stories that don't add up. Bruises that appear regularly. Burns, cuts, marks that the child can't or won't explain consistently. 3. Sudden behavior changes. An outgoing kid goes silent. Flinches when adults raise their voice. Hoards food. Won't make eye contact. 4. Fear of going home. A child who lingers everywhere else. School, library, friends' houses. Anywhere but home. 5. An adult who won't let the child speak. A guardian who answers every question, isolates the child from others, has rehearsed explanations for everything. If you see these signs, you don't need proof. You don't need certainty. You just need to make one phone call. Third, the numbers that matter. Write these down. Put them in your phone right now. National Child Abuse. Hotline 1-800-4A. Child. That's 1-800-422-4453. Available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can report anonymously. You can report suspicions, not just certainties. Trained counselors will assess whether investigation is warranted. National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-7-997-233 for adults in abusive situations who need help escaping. 911 for immediate danger. Here's what you need to understand. Rue tried calling. She called the Tennessee DCS hotline from a gas station payphone 5 weeks into being homeless. The report went to Randall Sykes because he was her assigned coordinator. He buried it. She tried telling a school counselor. The counselor called Randall directly. She tried approaching a police officer. The officer called Randall to arrange pickup. The system failed her 3 times because the wrong people controlled the response. But when 89 Hell's Angels decided she mattered, the system had to listen. When Margaret Chen filed emergency motions, when Razorback contacted FBI agent Moreno, when enough people made enough noise, suddenly the system worked. You might not have 89 motorcycles, but you have a phone, you have a voice, and you have the choice to be the person who doesn't walk past. One more thing. If you're watching this and you're the child in this story, if you're the one hiding, running, trying to survive until you age out or until someone finally sees you, I need you to hear this. You are not the problem. The adult who's hurting you is the problem. The system that's failing you is the problem. Your job is not to fix this alone. Your job is to survive long enough for help to arrive. Call that hotline, 1-800-422-445-3. Tell them everything. If the first person doesn't help, call again. If the second person doesn't help, call a 3rd time. Keep calling until someone listens the way Gideon listened to Rue. You are not invisible. You just haven't found your person yet. But they're out there. Keep trying. Now, if this story changed how you see the people around you, if you learned something that could save a life, if you believe every child deserves someone who shows up, subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who works with children, who has aging parents, who might be the one person who doesn't walk past when it matters. Comment below. Who was the person who saw you when you needed to be seen? Or tell me, what do you wish someone had done for you? Because visibility is what Rue never had until she saved a stranger's life and whispered 6 words to a man in a Hell's Angels vest. More stories like this are coming. Stories about people the world tried to make invisible, and the communities that refused to look away. Stories that prove courage doesn't require power, just the decision to act when action matters. Stay. Subscribe. Show up.